What's going on, everyone, and welcome to WreckTalk. And not talking about what we normally do today. If you watch me, I usually just talk about tech, college football related things. This is college football related. Interesting story. You've probably heard kind of the saying, hey, the movie's nothing like the book. You hear that all the time. This might be a case where the true story that the book is based off of is nothing like the book that the movie's based off of. That makes any sense. So, if you haven't seen in the news, it's kind of a big story right now. Michael Oher has filed legal proceedings, a petition against the Tuohys family. If you don't know who they are, they're the people that the Blind Side movie and book were based off of. They adopted Michael Oher, ended up playing at Ole Miss, drafted 23rd overall by the Baltimore Ravens, and they seem to have fallen out. Now, what was The Blind Side? Blind Side was a movie about Michael Oher and the Tuohys, kind of talking about the blind side being the most important position on the offensive line because most quarterbacks are right-handed. They can't see what's coming off their blind side. It follows Michael Oher. He comes from very troubled upbringing. His mother, addicted to drugs, didn't have much to do with him. He ends up meeting this boy, SJ, part of the Tuohys family. They end up bringing him in their home, getting him into this private Christian school, teaching him everything about football, getting him a tutor, working with him academically, getting his grades up, and getting him into Ole Miss. And there's some details that are put in there that are interesting. One, he's adopted in the movie and in the book, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And it does mention that they're Ole Miss boosters. They're very affluent, and that they definitely didn't push him to go to Ole Miss, which I thought's an interesting detail, because his high school coach was Hugh Freeze, now at Auburn, but was at Ole Miss as their tight ends coach the same time Michael Oher was at Ole Miss. Now, if you've never seen Flemlo Raps, I'm going to link both the videos he did on this in the description. He's a fantastic YouTuber. He does deep dives into like what happened to Vince Young or what happened with this athlete. A lot of more like investigative journalist type things into pro football and college football. He did 2 videos on this. You should check those out. Maybe even watch those before you even watch the rest of the video. A lot of things I talk about were things that I learned, saw in his video, and then kind of corroborated doing my own research. But Michael Oher criticized the film, I think not long after it came out. In the film, Michael Oher is portrayed as this kind of bumbling idiot that really needed the Tuohys to teach him everything, including football. And he kind of came out and said, I don't know why they portrayed me like I'm a moron. I mean, they really portrayed him like Lenny from Of Mice of Men, and that wasn't the case. Michael was like, man, I just had a troubled past. I needed a stable home to be a part of. I'm not dumb. Also, Michael Oher was a very successful football player, high school athlete before he got with the Tuohys. So I don't know why they made it out like he didn't know how to play football at all until, it just makes the Tuohys look better, which we're also going to talk about later on in the video. Now, the first thing I thought when I saw that was, well, why didn't Michael speak up and, not allow them to portray him that way? Well, this gets into NIL and why it's important that we have it. Now, it's run rampant. Everyone wants some kind of reining in and really targeting NIL to what it was originally intended, which was exactly things like this. So if you're a huge, detractor of NIL, this is probably the best example I can think of as to why we need it. The NIL didn't exist when, Michael was a student at LSU, a student athlete, which means he couldn't have any input into the film because he couldn't profit from his own name, image, and likeness, which is baffling to me. Like, so everyone else gets to make decisions about a film and make money off it that's based off of your life. A huge part of it is you. They get to make you look like anything, some bumbling idiot, and you just have to be okay with it. It's why NIL is important and why he wasn't able, to have any creative input into the process. Now, in response to the legal proceedings, the Tuohys have said that Michael's basically tried to shake them down. Their lawyer has said that he reached out to them and said basically, hey, you need to pay me $15 million before this gets ugly publicly. Like, you wouldn't want that. That's not exactly what he said. That's the gist of what he said. They also said that they paid everything that was due to him, which I guess we'll see. I don't know what that means. That's not Michael's allegation. But basically, the more that you learn about this from seeing The Blind Side, which honestly I don't think was that great of a movie to start with, just for the sole fact of they did make him look like an idiot. And they even have a scene where they're like, oh my God, he's so dumb, but he tested high in protective abilities toward family. And it's like, that's not something you test for in high school. It just serves to that's basically the crux as to why the mother of the Tuohy family is like, oh, he needs to play football, which we've already established he already knew how to do. It's pretty much the dumbest thing ever. But anyway, say they paid everything to him. Their lawyer has also come out, and this is where I think one of the most important classes you take in high school is in literature when you go over logical fallacies, because this family and their lawyers are about to rattle off about three of them. Martin Singer says, who represents the Tuohy, says the notion that a couple worth hundreds of millions of dollars would connive to withhold a few $1,000s in profit participation payments from anyone, let alone from someone they loved as a son, defies belief. I mean, I can't even believe it. Yeah. I mean, it's clear. It's self-evident. It's like the Constitution. This is a self-evident truth that the Tuohys would never do what Michael's alleging he would do. As Flemlo said in his video, and I agree with, this assumes a lot of things. I don't know that the Tuohys are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They might be worth north of $100 million. I don't know about hundreds of millions. They own hundreds of different fast food franchises, evidently. And the most contentious thing is that they basically only profited a few $1,000s, or that they withheld a few $1,000s. That ain't what Michael says. Michael's allegations is you stole millions of dollars from me. And that's why this $15 million shakedown. So the movie grossed $300 million. $15 million would be 5% of that, which I think is fair. And if he was never paid that, and they were, seems fair. And he could have just went to them and been like, look, I don't really want to go public with this. I'm hoping we can work something out. Here's what I think is fair for me to be paid. And they could have gave him the middle finger for all we know, right? Their wording is that, he's trying to shake down these, super affluent people. Could not be the case. So just because let's assume they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That doesn't mean they wouldn't do this. There's plenty of wealthy people that have been caught doing super underhanded things. One does not imply the other. Just like, if you have a super successful YouTube channel, well, then you would never plagiarize someone's material, or you would never give someone credit, whatever. That's not the case, I don't even feel like I have to insult people's intelligence in saying wealthy people won't steal from other people. In fact, if that were the case, you would never have people convicted of like embezzlement that were already wealthy. That would never happen, but it does. So really just kind of a red herring here. Like doesn't make sense in my opinion. Now, equally as curious to me, because this is just Rex advice to you. If you're being accused of something legally, the best thing you can do is shut your mouth about it, especially publicly, like in a recorded interview, which is what SJ does. Sean Tuohy Jr. Decides to give, I guess, an interview to Barstool Sports, where he makes, this might be the best example of a non sequitur I've ever seen in like an argument. If you don't know, non sequitur is Latin for does not follow. It's basically where you're like, I'm trying to get A to B, and A to B have no relation to each other whatsoever. It's like me trying to say Michael is right here, and my argument is 44. Doesn't make sense. So this is what SJ says. Again, this is the son of the Tuohy family. And he's basically talking about if this is true, what he's being alleged of. I mean, this is quote unquote, I mean, that's such a compliment to the intelligence level of my family to be able to pull that off and execute it. We are so much smarter than everyone else in that case, he said in a Monday interview. He then alluded to his work as the Razorbacks assistant director of football operations. We'll get to that in a second. So he's now set up this nice, like mutually exclusive scenario where if Michael's right, they're Einstein level of intelligence. No, that's also not the case. They don't have to have 160 level IQs to pull off what Michael's alleging them of doing. What it could be is because they're wealthy, because they're well connected, because they have good standing in the community that they're in, they use their power and leverage and influence to more easily do something like this. Like, that could also be true. But it says he then alluded to his work as the Razorbacks assistant director of football operations in 2018 and 2019 as helping show he's not exactly a genius in terms of his predictive availabilities. Really? We got a vacuum out there? Anyway. He says, I've missed on, this is again SJ, I've missed on more 4- and 5-star kids when I was at the University of Arkansas and now at UCF. Tuohy then essentially says if his family's acumen were as sharp as Orr's lawsuit alleges, he would have been much more successful with his recruiting projections and would be, quote unquote, working for Nick Saban if that was the case. So now he's like made a false equivalency, mutually exclusive scenario in two utterly ridiculous things. If Michael's right, then we're 160 level IQ people, and if Michael's right, I would be such a great football coach or staffer that I would work for Nick Saban. And I'm just going to be honest, this is really suspicious to me that you would just kind of go to red herrings in response. Like, if I was going to say something and I was SJ, I'd be like, absolutely, we didn't take anything from him. Like, and again, I'm looking at excerpts. Maybe he didn't, but I would probably look at like, I know he got, it was about this much, and this is what we got. I mean, I wouldn't go into, if what Michael's saying is true, I'd be working for Nick Saban. I mean, that just seems intentionally obtuse and deceptive to me. And I'm just going based off what, I see here. Now, their lawyers, the Tuohy's lawyers also say, well, Michael had to have known about this conservatorship. So the big crux of Michael's, the other big crux of this is that Michael wasn't in fact adopted. This is what what started this whole thing with Michael is he basically thought a conservatorship was adoption. And in the movie, in the book that the Tuohys wrote, they call it an adoption. So the Tuohys lawyers are basically saying, well, Michael knew it was a conservatorship because he mentions it in his own book that was written in 2011. But what he wrote in his 2011 book is really compelling evidence to what he's claiming that he didn't know he was in a conservatorship. He basically says, and I'm just summarizing, they said they call it a conservatorship, which to my understanding is exactly the same as adoption and makes me a part of the Tuohy family. I don't care what they call it, as long as I'm a part of the family. And he alleges that they put him in a conservatorship instead of adopting him because he was already 18 years old. And putting him in a conservatorship allowed them to get him like medical insurance, get him a driver's license, get him set up for school and all these things. The problem is, number one, he's definitely stating in his book he doesn't understand what this conservatorship is if he thinks it's the same as adoption. Adoption and being a conservator are worlds apart from each other. They're not even close to being the same thing, right? I mean, this came up with Britney Spears where her father was taking money from her as a fee to be her conservator. She didn't even have like reproductive rights over herself. Now, conservatorships are different in different states. I mean, and I think they have different, I guess levels of intensity, if you want to call that. Like, this conservatorship seems a lot different than the Britney Spears one. I'm not saying that they're exactly the same. However, it did give them rights to his name, image, and likeness. It seems like they didn't enforce it beyond the Blindside movie, but they could have taken part of his NFL contract or dictated who his agent was if they wanted to. So it's weird because they could have adopted him as an 18-year-old in Tennessee and done everything that a conservatorship would do, but it wouldn't have given them near the authority, decision-making abilities over his life. Now, the other thing they're saying is to make the movie, they had to put him in a conservatorship and get him into Ole Miss. Again, an adoption would have done the same thing. Now, in Flemlo's video, he talks about this legal expert, Victoria Hayman, who basically echoes that sentiment that, hey, an adoption would have done everything they're claiming this conservatorship would have done. And in fact, it's so, conservatorships are not common, by the way. Really, conservatorships are for minors, or from what I've seen most often, someone who's not competent enough to make decisions for themselves. And that's what's so insane to me, that when this comes up, Britney Spears isn't competent to make decisions for herself, but she can make millions and millions of dollars a year, and they can make a cut of it. Michael Orr is put in a conservatorship. Because he's in a conservatorship, legally speaking, can be compelled not to make decisions for himself, but he can be the 23rd overall pick for the Baltimore Ravens. Something doesn't jive with it. And Victoria Hayman agrees. In fact, she says, it's surprising to her that a judge even allowed this to happen. Because, as we saw with the Britney Spears thing, it is notoriously difficult to get out of a conservatorship once you're in it, if your conservators don't want to let you out of it. Now, to be fair to the Tuohys, they have come out, they have said, if Michael wants out, they'll definitely let him out. They're cool with that. They'll dissolve the conservatorship, today, if that's what he wants. But we'll get into that later as well. Now, I wasn't going to bring up Hugh Freeze. I talked about him a little bit before, but for some reason, he decided to open his mouth about this. Now, I don't know why he would make a comment on this, being first-year head coach at Auburn. Like, it seems to me that there's nothing good that can come out of him making a statement about this in Michael's defense or in the Tuohys' defense. Like, if I was the AD for Auburn, I'd be kind of upset that he said anything. But Hugh Freeze comes out and says, I think it will all, whatever happens will happen. Now, let me back up. First thing, he says, I love Michael Orr. He's like part of our family. I love the Tuohys. Freeze said via the Auburn Observer, I think it's sad, and I certainly don't claim to understand the ins and outs of adoption, conservatory, all that. But I know what I witnessed, and I witnessed a family that took in a young man, and I think without that, there is no story. First of all, that's BS. That's BS. There's definitely a story without the Tuohys. Like, the main part of this thing is Michael Orr, his ability to play football, and his ability to overcome his past. Now, is part of the story what the Tuohys did in taking him in, and was that great? Yes. But I think everyone who watches that movie can agree that he's a much bigger part of that story than the Tuohy family. Funny that he doesn't say anything about that Michael Orr is a big part of it, and really, coming to the defense of the Tuohys. As I was reading before, he also says, I think it will all, whatever happens will happen, of course. The facts will come out, but I love both sides of it. Sean and Leanne Tuohy did something that most families, a lot of us talk about doing things, but they actually put the shoes on and pulled the boots up and got in the arena and did something. I think that's admirable. It is, but if Michael's right about what he's alleging in his lawsuit, doesn't that kind of undo all that? And doesn't that mean that there was definitely a predatory nature of how they handled this? I mean, the movie coming out paints them in the best possible light, right? The book paints them in the best possible light. And we'll also talk about the timing of it is horrible for Michael as far as when the film and book released, and it's great for everyone else. So, Hugh Freeze, he coaches him in high school. Michael Orr's first year at Ole Miss is 05. He leaves in 08. And Hugh Freeze comes in 06, leaves in 07. So it also benefited Hugh Freeze. This probably their relationship with the Tuohys, him being their coach and Ole Miss, like it all worked out for them. Doesn't really matter where Michael Orr plays football. He was probably going to be good anyways. He's a phenomenal talent. But yeah, obviously I think Hugh Freeze is not a good person. He's a great coach, but he's a morally questionable guy. And it makes me wonder, like, what else might come out about him in this lawsuit and kind of how all that went down. I don't know for sure. I have nothing concrete, but it is suspicious just how all that went out with him coaching him, them both ending up at Ole Miss. But anyways, in conclusion, I want to go through, like, what I see based on the facts and just some questions that just don't make sense to me as like a casual observer. One, if they needed to put him in a conservatory, why make a film about it while he was in school? Like, that's what I'm saying. The timing of this was horrible for Michael and great for everyone else. Why not just wait if your interests are truly the best interest of Michael Orr? Why not wait until he graduates and he's in the NFL and then do it? Then he can have all the creative input he wants. Then he can make money off of it, right? And all of that. And I guess in that case, then you really don't need to have him in a conservatorship at all, right? Like, it seems like putting him in a conservatorship allowed them to make this while he was in school and everything work out. You know, like if I was his conservator, like I would just say we need to wait until you get out of school. The other thing is, why did they do a conservatorship and not adoption? Again, the Tuohys could have adopted him instead of put him in a conservatorship, which a conservatorship is way more intrusive in your life than an adoption, or it gives the people way more right decision making over your life than an adoption. The other thing is, why did they not just dissolve the conservatorship once he left Ole Miss? If they're saying that they did it to get his medical insurance, driver's license, get him set up in school, and because they were boosters of Ole Miss, let's say let's take that at face value and say yes, that was, you do need a conservatorship for that. Why is he still in it today? Now they said they let him out of it, and I do believe that. But why didn't they dissolve it once he graduated? I'll tell you why I think they didn't, and why they didn't press the conservatorship to get anything else out of him. And this is just my speculation. Because Michael didn't understand what a conservatorship was, clearly. So approaching him and saying, hey, we need to now dissolve this conservatorship, keep in mind what he thought it was. He thought that made him family with them. So if they said we need to dissolve the conservatorship, in his mind that would have meant that they didn't want to be his family anymore. And that gets into the last thing of like, why lie about the adoption? So they called it a conservatorship with him probably because the easiest path to getting him in a conservatorship would be for him to agree to it. But why did they lie to everyone? Why did the movie, the book not mention the conservatorship? They definitely portrayed it as an adoption. And in the book that the Tuohys family wrote about this, let me look up the name of it. It's called In a Heartbeat, Sharing the Power of Cheerful Giving. Never uses the word conservatorship in 271 pages, but about 30 times it uses the term adoption and includes an adoption form in the book, which is a complete lie. It's a complete lie. So that's what makes me think something stinks to high heavens here. Like, why lie about it? Why put him in a conservatorship? Why not dissolve it? And everything that you look at benefits the Tuohys, and it doesn't benefit Michael Orr. Again, you could have just waited to do all this movie stuff until he graduated. But then you don't get, like, you have to deal with his input, right? If you're doing it the way they did it, it works out best for them. And if you wait for him to graduate, it works out best for Michael Orr. So again, with all of those questions I asked, it's like why they did it, it seems like it benefited the Tuohys. Again, this is my speculation, but let me know what you guys think. Am I off base in thinking that something smells here, that the Tuohys, the way that they handled this was not great? Is Michael just looking for money? One of their allegations is he's coming out with a new book and he's trying to drum up, interest for it, and this is one avenue of doing it. Tell me what you think in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. Again, definitely check out Flemlo's videos, and y'all have a good one.